Hi, this is Mark Arnold with the Fun Ideas podcast, and today I have a special guest, a one-time member of the Lovin Spoonful, and he did some producing for the Turtles, which is what we're really talking about today. This is Jerry Yester. How are you, sir?
Not too shabby.
Okay, so before we go into the Turtles talk, which I'm working on a book on the Turtles with a friend of mine named Charles Rosenay, just tell me a little bit about yourself. And you were in a couple different groups, so I guess tell me a little bit about the new Christy Minstrels, Modern Folk Quartet, and Lovin Spoonful, how you kind of got into that.
Well, the new Christy Minstrels, I was a founding member of that for the very first album. Mm-hmm. Never did perform with them because it was not supposed to be a recording group. I mean, a performing group. And at that time, it was a group of groups. And there was the Randy Sparks Three. There was another group whose name slips my mind.
It's okay.
There were like 2 or 3 members of that. And the In group, INN, which I was a member of with John Forshey and Carol Dugan. And then Dolan Ellis, Terry Wadsworth, and Art Podell kind of rounded it out. And Bill Cudmore, he was a member of the Flint Ridge Four. Mm-hmm. With Carol and John, actually, but Carol and John left the Flint Ridge Four and we formed the In group, and then Bill was added to the Christies. And then we went on our first road trip, my very first road trip and ours, to Oklahoma City, Denver, and Salt Lake City. And while we were in Oklahoma City, Randy called and said, "You got to get back here. We're doing the Andy Williams show." We said, "We got 3 contracts we can't get out of. You're going to have to replace us." And so they did.
Wow. So how did that lead to the Modern Folk Quartet, or is that the same thing? Maybe I'm
actually, to tell you the truth, on a one-time evening with John Forshey's sister, we had a little romantic episode, only one, which led to my oldest son, who's now 58.
Wow, that's older than me. I'm 54.
I didn't meet him until 8 years ago, or 7.5 years ago. And he found me, and I had told, I have 4 daughters, and I told them that there's another sibling out there somewhere, and maybe we'll get a knock on the door someday. And I got a letter, and I called him up, and a month later he was here at the house, spent 8 days with us, and 2 of my kids flew in and for that time, and it was great. It was absolutely great. And they've all been, the 5 of them, been very close since then, and us too. Anyway, so that broke the In group up. And so I went solo for a little while, just a very little while, and then joined the Easy Riders. They had a hit in the 50s, All Day, All Night, Marianne. It was a #1 record. Kind of one of the starting records of the folk era. Kind of started it going, and then the Kingston Trio really got it going. Right. But I joined the group, and it was only one original member, and another good friend of mine, Doug Myers, and I made it a trio. We did 1 album and didn't perform. We did 2 solid weeks of intensive rehearsal at CBS Studios. They gave us a room, a little room that we could practice in, and made the album in 2 3-hour sessions, which is what the Christies took also, 2 3-hour sessions. Far cry from today.
Right.
And at the end of that, we thought about performing, but it never happened. And then I got a call from Les Baxter to join the Les Baxter Balladeers, a group he put together to compete with the Christy Minstrels. And there was 1 album, 2 3-hour sessions, and then it was whittled down to 6 members, I think, maybe 5 or 6 members, and did a couple of gigs, and one was booked in Reno. And in that meantime, before Reno, the MFQ had come over from Hawaii, and one of their members had some real serious mental problems and ended up going back to Hawaii, and I replaced him. His name was Stan White. And right after I had the first rehearsal with the MFQ, or 2 rehearsals, I went to Reno. And then Herbie Cohen, our manager, called while I was in Reno, says, listen, man, you got to get back here. You guys are doing a movie, Palm Springs Weekend. You're going to do a little musical interlude in there. So I told Paul Hansen, the leader of the Balladeers, I said, well, my dad has had a heart attack in in a Joshua Tree, and I've got to go back lying my face off. And he said, okay. And I went back to did the movie and came back the next day or day after. And Paul picked me up and he said, so how did it go? And I said, oh, well, he's doing okay. And he said, your mother called while you were gone.
Whoops.
I hadn't spoken to my mother in 6 months, and she decided to call me, find me in Reno, and called me and talked to Paul. He said, that's I would have done the same thing, Paul said. And so after Reno was done, that was it for me in the Balladeers, and the MFQ kicked into gear, and we started performing pretty much right away. First gig was in Vancouver, came back in Scottsdale, and then we started doing concerts and play the Unicorn. Of course, that was Herbie's club. And maybe the Troubadour before we left, but we moved to New York City in the spring of '63. And I joined kind of around late January, maybe in '63. And by the spring, we moved to New York City because there was a lot more work out of the East Coast, out of a lot of college concerts and stuff. And our home base in the Village, we played the Village Gate a lot. Right. And that started that. We worked a lot. We were doing a couple hundred concerts a year. We were just happening. Mm-hmm. So then the British invasion happened, and it was funny. Like that started in February 9th of '64. The Beatles came on the Ed Sullivan Show, changed everything with like. Across Greenwich Village, all the folk clubs by summer became little rock clubs. And the MFQ started was like a tadpole. First Chip went to an electric bass, then I went to acoustic electric guitar, electrified Henry's banjo. And by spring of '65, we started doing demos with Eric Jacobson, who we'd met on a cross-country tour that we did with the Bessie Griffin and the Gospel Pearls, and Knoblich Upper 10,000, and Lou Gottlieb. And Eric was in the Knoblich Upper 10,000. And after that tour, in the summer of '64, he decided he wanted to be a record producer. And he had saved up a bunch of money and started doing demos. So the demos were with Henry and I, John Sebastian, Zalyanovsky, Cass Elliott, Denny Doherty, a couple of other people, and he found a drummer named Styx Evans who played on it. And Felix Popularity did some stuff a little later on. And Eric's first 2 were Oh Susanna he made with Zolly singing lead, and then Tom Dooley with me singing leads, folk rock versions. And these were like, except for the Springfields, who did Silver Threads and Golden Needles in '62. This was the first folk rock stuff done that I'm aware of. But it took really until next spring to really kick it off. And by late '64, the Spoonful got together, first with John and Zolly. And then they farmed out to Long Island and got Steve Boone. And Steve had been in a band with Joe Butler, so he recommended Joe as the drummer, and they formed and they started rehearsing in the basement of the Albert Hotel, and then started performing at the Village Music Hall on 3rd Street, just down from the Night Owl, and a couple blocks from McDougal. And I loved going in and listening to those guys. They were just so amazing in the early days. And they wanted me to help them with vocal arrangements, background vocals. And I went down to see them rehearse in the basement of the Albert. They were rehearsing like 3 inches of water. with the amplifiers up on boxes and stuff. I said, God, don't touch anything. You guys are going to get electrocuted. But they managed to survive that. And I helped them out with maybe 3 or 4 vocal arrangements, backgrounds for stuff on the first album. And they were off and running. And then by spring of '65, the MFQ did a folk rock gig at the Night Owl Cafe as the Fat City Four, and had Buzzy Linhart as our drummer. God bless old Buzzy, he's gone now, but he was on acid that night. And his tempos were going up and down and up and down, and crash, hit the crash cymbal saying, I see the clear light. So we said, oh, we love you, Buzzy, but this ain't gonna work. And got a kind of a Four Seasons type drummer from Brooklyn who worked really well, wore a suit though, and we were just so hip. Yeah, anyway, and right after that, we moved to California because with the folk rock scene, there was a lot more going on in California. So back to LA, and I moved into Laurel Canyon, and I started working 5 nights a week, 5 sets a night, 10 minutes in between, which killed us for the first week and a half or so. But then we kicked into gear, and it was like the breaks were too long. It was like, come on, let's get back on stage. And during that time, I got approached by the producer of the Monkees to do an audition. And I did an audition and got the part. But as soon as I heard that, I thought, God, I mean, the MFQ was really into some stuff that I loved. I said, thanks a lot, but I can't do it. I can't leave the group. I really got to stay with what I'm doing. And they got Peter Tork.
I was going to say, who did they get in your place?
Yeah, they had everybody else. And I said, it was Bert Schneider. I said, why don't you make the MFQ the Monkees? I mean, that shit happens to us on the road all the time, and it's real. He said, no, we got a lot invested in these 3 other guys. We need just one more guy. And and I said, okay, and I just stayed with the MFQ. There have been times where I wondered if that was, should I have done, but actually, I think I'd be dead if I had done that, that much success at that, and me being just a compulsive person, God knows what would happen.
Right.
And so many other things wouldn't have happened that are great parts of my life. It's absolutely was the best decision. Anyway, and after making that decision, 6 months later, the MFQ didn't break up, we just banded. The MFQ is still going, really. Never really broke up, just goes dormant. We resurfaced in the mid 70s, again in the early mid 80s, started touring Japan in the late 80s, and making albums. We made altogether maybe 5 more albums after the first 2 during all that period. So we did a lot. And it's funny, with a 4-part vocal group, you can't do that with just anybody, and so that's why we would never break up, because to do that is a wonderful thing. And those guys, and it wasn't anything like the, pardon me expression, you guys, Eagles, who a lot of members ended up hating each other. The MFQ is, we've always gotten along with each other. We're like brothers, and it's just a matter of love. And anyway, after we broke up, speaking of the Turtles, Chip joined the Turtles as the bass player, and he did the arrangement of the horns and vocals, and guided the basic track of Happy Together. And he came up to my house in Laurel Canyon one afternoon. He said, hey, I want you to listen to some, see what you think. And I put it was Happy Together. I said, are you kidding? That's a #1 record. He said, really? You think so? I said, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He had doubts. That's funny.
Well, it was just undeniable. I mean, it was, and Bonner and Gordon were the writers.
Right.
Guys that we, when we got the folk rock thing going, was really happening by the autumn of '65. And we, in November, we started a 3-month tour in a Clark Cortez, which was the first mobile home that you could drive from the inside instead of towing it.
Hmm.
And there were five in the group, and Cyrus's wife, all in this thing, and 3 months cross country and back.
Wow.
And during that time, Henry Diltz got his first camera as we were going east. 8 months later, he was making his living with it.
Wow.
Yeah, he would be laying out in the middle of a field when we stopped to take a leak or something, and it's like, Jesus, where's Henry? And he'd be way out there lying on the ground, taking a picture. It's like, come on, for Christ's sake, Henry. You get him. And at the end of that tour, we had a slide party, and there the slide pictures are funny. When it got to Henry's, it was like, whoa, that's what he was doing out in the field. And it was obvious from the very beginning how amazing he was as a photographer. And just really took off. Anyway, so meanwhile, back with Chip, he stayed with the Turtles for a while, and then ended up producing the Monkees, oddly enough, and had 2 big hits with them, or more, but a big album, Headquarters album.
Right.
And Eddie Ho played on some stuff of that. He played on like Daydream Believer. I don't think that was on that album, though. I'm not sure.
No, it was on Birds, Bees, and Monkeys. It was just
okay.
Single for a while. Yeah.
Right. And I played bass on Shades of Grey and sang background on a few things. And it's funny, I did a cruise with Peter Tork, may he rest in peace. And I told some other people about that. I played bass on Shades of Grey. Yeah, and Eddie Ho played drums on blah, blah, blah. And Peter came on and said, hey, man, we played on all that stuff. I said, well, not quite, It's kind of like I said, it's like Clapton playing on some stuff for the Beatles. I mean, It's not a big thing. It was like a guest thing. And
yeah,
but that album was so important to them because it wasn't the Wrecking Crew.
Right.
It was basically them. And Mickey was, he became a drummer for the TV show. I mean, he wasn't really a full-fledged drummer.
Right.
So he didn't mind if Eddie played or, like that. And he did play on a couple of things. But anyway, and right about that time, I did a session. Jack Nietzsche called me and he said, listen, I got a gig with the Turtles and I don't have time to do both of them. Can you take one of the arrangements? I said, sure. And Jack was a really good friend and helped me get started as an arranger. I did some ghost arranging for him, I'd go to the session with him and there would be something, they'd ask a question, the musicians, and well, let me think about that. Walk away to me. What the hell do you mean by this? It's supposed to be a C sharp, not a C. Oh, okay. And, stuff like that. But this one, it was just a full-fledged Jack and me. And he did She'd Rather Be With Me, which turned out big. And I did Me About You.
Oh, okay.
And I love the way that came out. And Joe Wizard was the producer. And Dave Guard was staying I was married to Judy Hinsky at the time. And Dave Guard was a guest at our house for like, a month or at least. He was trying to get his color guitar method going. He was living in Australia at the time and came back to the States for that. And went with us to the session and he brought these hash cookies, that were just lethal. And he gave not only one, but 2 to Joe Wizard, who really wasn't into it. He just thought they were cookies. And Dave really should have warned him. And I looked up we were doing the thing, and I looked up and Joe wasn't there, but his head was down on the console. He was just gone, And anyway, right after that, I got a call from John Sebastian, who said that Zolly was leaving the group and would I replace him? And I said, Jesus, let me think about it, John. I'll call you back. I called him back 5 minutes later and said, yeah, I'll do it.
So that's simple. Okay, cool.
Yeah, right. Well, I just said, what do you think, Judy? She said, sounds good. And we did it. It was a tough move for her. John Forche, who is still a really good friend, and turns out, of course, he's the uncle of my oldest son. and it was gone by the time that we discovered each other. And I sure wish John could have met him, my son, Jeff, and he just would have loved him. Anyway, John helped drive Judy and a lot of our stuff to New York from LA in our station wagon. And I flew like 10 days before that to start rehearsals with the group out on Long Island at John's house. And gosh, it wasn't but about 3-4 weeks when we did our first gig with me. And it was a little shaky at first maybe, but it clicked into overdrive pretty quickly, and did an Ed Sullivan show not too long after that. Then after the Spoonful album was finished, Zolly started doing an album with Jack Nietzsche. And Jack saw how, and he flew in from California, he saw how this was not going to be like a week-long project. He said, I'm not going to be able to be here that long, Zolly. Why don't you talk to Jerry about producing it? So Zolly came to me and I said, sure. And so I started working with Zolly. And we worked really well together and just had a great time. And I love the album, Alive and Well in Argentina, it's called. And he did a version of Last Date, instrumental on the guitar. And he did one take, and I said, that's it. And he said, really? No one has ever let me have the first take before. I said, that's it, unless there's something you hear. And absolutely beautiful, just amazing. He was such an amazing guitar player. But we had such a great time. And there's the piece that ends it, Lieutenant Stinkhausen Moved Through the Fair, was an instrumental that was, I don't know, about somewhere between 7 and 9 minutes long. But we had such a great time doing it. It took forever to mix the damn thing. It was a mix.
I've heard it before.
it was a mixed composition. It didn't, if you started the machine and ran it through, you wouldn't have it. It was a mixed composition, bringing things in and out. And when we got through with the album, I said, Zappa just moved here about the same time I did. And let's go play it for him, see what he thinks. So I called him up and said, Frank, would you mind listening to a thing that Zolly and I just finished? He said, sure, bring it over. And we listened to it, and he especially liked Stinkhausen. Because it was that kind of, not quite irreverent, but it was just totally out of the ballpark, and didn't follow any rules, and so he liked that. And then when the album was finished, for a budget of $42,000, I think, which back then was a lot of money. Artie Butler, who was the president of Buddha Records, Artie Butler, no, Artie Rip. Oh shit, I'm having a senior moment. You mind if we finish this in Spanish?
No, that's fine. Well,
anyway,
Artie Rip, let's just leave it there.
Artie Rip wanted to talk to Zolly up at his office. Said, okay, Zolly, love the album. When are you going to start getting out there and promoting it? And Zolly said, I want to get into movies, so I'm through performing. And
wow.
Artie said, what? After all of that money. And so they basically dropped the album like a hot potato.
Wow. Yeah, I never knew all that. I mean, I knew about the album. I've heard the album before. And,
didn't do any promotion on it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I figured just people thought it was too weird or something. I don't know. Wow, if you didn't promote it.
Now, 2 years later, they re-released it with an apology on the back saying, this really was a wonderful album, and we dropped the ball, but here it is again. But it didn't go anywhere then either. It was re-released maybe 15 years ago in Europe. But that's kind of it. I think it might be available on iTunes,
right,
and Amazon. I'm really not sure. I got my complimentary copy, and I've never gotten any royalties for it. But those things happen. Anyway,
So you cleared up a few things that I just didn't know. I mean, I'm a Lovin Spoonful fan, but I don't necessarily know the history. I honestly thought you just kind of came out of nowhere when Zolly left. I didn't know you were already involved with the band, or at least were aware of them, And
Yeah, well, Zolly was actually my best friend in the group when they joined.
Yeah.
We did a lot of stuff together, hung out together, and but I was friends with the whole group. I mean, I really loved them a lot, and working with them a little bit on the first album. I played piano on Do You Believe in Magic?
Oh, okay.
John called me up and asked me if I'd do that, and I got there just as Zolly finished his guitar solo. He overdubbed his guitar solo. And he was just jumping up and down. He was having such a great time. It was a great moment. And then I did my boom, 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 piano part. And I couldn't hear it on the single. It was kind of way back there. But when the CD was released, when the CD was released, it's a lot clearer sound.
Yeah.
And there I was. I said, I'll be damned.
I think that's the version I've heard first. I heard you guys on CD before. I did everything backwards before vinyl, and then
that's only understandable. Yeah. A lot of people are just totally in love with vinyl, and I do love the sound of vinyl. I just had so many experiences of finishing a record and playing for somebody and be da 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 and da da da, it was skipped and I couldn't get the bottom end.
Yes.
I couldn't get the bottom end out of it that I wanted, that kind of thing. So, and digital is getting better and better every day. So I got no problem with it.
Yeah, I still like CDs over vinyl. I still collect vinyl, but it's like, my preference would be have a copy both ways. Have a big vinyl album just to have as a souvenir, and then play the CD. But
and I love working on a computer. My studio is based on a computer, and it's the way I like to describe that between tape and computer is the tape is like a photograph, and the computer is like a painting. I mean, you can really get in there and change things.
Right.
I produced an album for a fellow named Gavin Coyle, who lives in Chicago. He's from Ireland. It turned out to be a wonderful album. I just love it. But there were times where, like, I got to at the end, I thought, damn, it should stop here, go into, just as, no rhythm, just like shots here and there, no rhythm, and then back into time, and you couldn't do that with tape, but it just worked perfectly in the computer. I love that.
Very cool. Just one little thing. I don't know if you'd mentioned almost being a monkey, but on I think it was Gilbert Gottfried's podcast, John Sebastian was on there, and he confirmed that Bert and who's the other guy? The other guy with Schneider, Bob
Rafelson.
Bob Rafelson. Yes, thank you. I'm having a senior moment. That they approached the Lovin Spoonful as a band first. So that you knew that. Okay, so that is true. Okay, because I've heard that's kind of rumors, and then I've heard it's true, but John Sebastian confirmed that they were approached first. Yeah.
Well, and then they started looking for people. The first one they got was Davey, and he was in New York starring in Oliver. And Judy went and saw him when we were still in New York and said, "You won't believe this guy I saw who's playing the Artful Dodger. He's amazing, this guy." And then flash forward like I don't know, close to a year, we're back in LA, and Bert and Davey came to the action where the MFQ was playing. And I met Davey, and I said, my wife heard you and was raving about you. And, oh, thanks, mate. But we did a lot of when the Spoonful got back together in '90. And worked for 25 years after that, until COVID, actually. And then, but did a lot of stuff. The very first concert we did back together was in Athens, Greece, for UNICEF. And it was Paul Revere, Dion, the Platters, Davy Jones, Mamas and the Papas, with see, who was it with Scott, I guess, Scott McKenzie.
Hmm.
And Cass Elliott
Right.
was replaced by Spanky.
Yes.
And oh gosh, and Michelle was replaced by John's daughter, Mackenzie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but we did a lot of concerts with Davey after that, and he was just so funny.
Yeah.
The very last one we did was maybe, I don't know, 6 years ago, something like that. It was a couple of years before he died.
Yeah.
And he just had everybody cracking up all the time. It wasn't like forced or anything. It was just so natural, so funny, you know.
Yeah. I have a lot of his solo albums. There's one that's just called Davy Jones Live. It's not an exciting title, but it has like all this rapport and commentary that he does between tracks. And he said that's like his best live album because it's just genuine with the audience going back and forth.
Well, I got a great story for the last album. I think it's the last album he did, his Christmas album. And Chip Douglas recorded and produced it in Hawaii.
Right.
At his studio. And on the first day, they were going to record that night. And Davey said, "Oh, I'm going to go to the beach, mate." And Chip said, "Listen, take some sunblock." Because, it's okay. I don't sunburn. He went to the beach and he got absolutely burnt to a crisp.
Wow.
And he got back and he couldn't really hold his arms down to his side. Everything was painful.
Ooh.
So he was stripped down to his underwear. This was in July, I think. And standing in front of a mic with his arms spread and his legs spread going, "I'm dreaming of a white Christmas."
Now, when did he record that album? I've heard that he recorded in the 70s, and I've heard that he recorded in the 90s, or something like that, or a little bit later, but it was later.
I believe it was early 2000s.
Okay, because I think where the confusion comes from is because there is a version of White Christmas that he did release in the 70s just as a fan club single or something.
Right.
But maybe he didn't do that one with Chip or something like that.
Yeah. Well,
Okay. That's off topic, but I was just kind of curious about that because I thought, how many times did he do these Christmas songs? I know they've been re-released a few times. In fact, as recently as last year, because that's the version I have. His daughter's
Chip just he never did really finish it.
Yeah.
But he just got it finished in this last year.
Yeah, and that's the version I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a couple of them made it onto the Monkees Christmas album also, but they sound a little bit different, but they're still the same songs.
Yeah.
So this is the part where, before I go into the Turtles part, I do have a quick question. So your brother, Jim, was in the association. Did you do anything with him back in the day when you had, or were you just on your own separate path?
No, we started together as the Yester brothers. In '61, I got a call from a guy who was a year behind me at Notre Dame High School. And in my senior year at Notre Dame, two of my friends and I did 2 Kingston Trio songs for the spring musical. Just one guitar, I was playing guitar, and then the 3 of us singing. El Matador, I think was one of them. I can't remember what the other one was. But this guy who was a junior then called me in, I guess the early fall of '61 and said, or it might have been summer. No, it had to have been fall. He said, "Can you get those guys back together to be entertainment for a dance at Corvallis High School next weekend?" Or it was like a week away. And it was a Catholic girls' high school in San Fernando Valley. And I said, "No, but my brother and I can do it." He said, "Okay, great." And and my brother and I just were singing around the house, didn't, Everly Brothers songs or Kingston Trio songs, and hadn't ever played anywhere before. And so he came home from work, and I said, "Hey, man, we're going to be the entertainment at Corvallis in a week or so." He said, "What are you talking about? What am I going to do? What am I going to do with my hands?" I said, "Well, learn to play the guitar." So he learned to play guitar for 7 songs in that week. And we did it, and it went over really well. And he caught the bug. And so we started checking out the coffee houses over in West Hollywood, and the Garrett Coffee House and the Unicorn. And the Unicorn was owned by Herbie Cohen's brother, Mutt Cohen, who became our manager. And then Herbie came back from being a mercenary soldier with Che Guevara, I think it was at that time. He and Fred Weintraub were both mercenary soldiers. The guy who owned the Bitter End, they knew each other that way. Anyway, and Herbie was kind of a wild man when he came back, but he calmed down and became our manager, the in-group's manager.
Zappa's manager, wasn't he?
Zappa, Tom Waits, Tim Buckley, Tom Waits, Linda
Oh, and
Ronstadt.
Eddie way later. I know that, but
Well, Howard is Herbie's cousin.
oh, I never knew that. I should have known that.
Herbie set them up. Herbie set them up in an office, in his office building,
Right.
when they were on their own as Flo and Eddie, and got them with Frank Zappa in the beginning.
Okay.
But yeah.
But they knew Zappa too, because I've known, that, as the Turtles and the Mothers going around in the early days, everybody seemed to play the same clubs. I mean, you're probably part of that too, so. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, when the MFQ was working at the Action, Frank was very new to the scene. I had no idea who he was, and neither did a whole lot of people. And he came up like one of those 10-minute breaks and said, "Hey man, do you mind if I sit in on guitar?" And it was a night that we were just really cooking. I said, "No, I'm sorry, man, but I gotta have this one." I didn't know who he was. I didn't know if he could play or not. And I wanted that set. So I turned him down. But it didn't really sour him on me. He was, shortly after that, he was my neighbor on Kirkwood in Laurel Canyon, just like 3 houses down. And we'd visit him, and he and Judy became good friends. And I was coming up, walking up Kirkwood when they had gotten back from their first gig, I think it was, the Mothers. And the band was standing out in front of his house, just pissed off. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Nah, can you believe that guy says we can't smoke pot?" And I said, "Really? How about that?" And well, we're gonna show him. We're gonna, but they didn't show him. And he said, "If you want a job, great. If you don't, smoke away."
Right.
But everybody else was certainly into it. And California, God knows, is into it now.
Right.
Arkansas is not. But I haven't smoked it myself in 36 years.
It's been a while for me too. It's like I go, why was it illegal then? No, it doesn't matter. I'm up here. I'm up here in Oregon, so if you're wondering.
Well, we moved here from Portland, actually.
Okay.
We lived there for 4 years, 6 years in Hawaii before that.
Oh wow. Okay.
And 12 years in Burbank before that.
So were you in Hawaii, since you said that, at the same time as Chip and Davey at the time? Is that what it was, or no?
It was right after that.
Oh, okay.
Right after I moved to Portland.
Okay.
But it was in Chip's studio that MFQ was using.
Oh, okay.
We made a studio in Hilo. That's where I was living, in Hilo. And in downtown Hilo, we rented a space in a tiny little strip mall that had a Korean, I don't know if it was a strip club or just a friends club, right? Pretty girls, hostesses, and a record store. And at the end of the record store. And the guy who owned the record store became partners with us. He was also a house builder. So he helped us build the studio so he could use the studio once in a while. He wanted to try engineering. And we did like 4 or 5 albums for the Japanese in that studio. And it was a nice place. Studio Naruka, it was called. And Naruka is a word that nobody knew what it meant. And we asked all these people in Japan, what does Naruka mean? Well, and they couldn't tell us, but they used it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it was a word. It just, they
Yeah, it
couldn't
was kind
describe
of like,
it. Yeah. Okay.
it's kind of like, what the,
Yeah. Okay. That's
anyway.
funny.
Yeah.
So, obviously, you were friends with the Turtles already at that point in
Yeah.
the 60s and doing your own
Yeah.
thing. Had you already done production? Because I know you did like production of Pat Boone. Was that at that time before the Turtles, or was
Basically,
that later? Okay.
It was basically at the time.
Okay.
We went into Pat Boone's studio. He owned Sun West at the time, out at the far end of Sunset, right near one of those streets, kind of where Sunset wants to end.
Oh, I know what that is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there was a huge roller rink across the street, and it was actually, let me think, it was one of the first studios I ever recorded in when I was like 16, and I was in a garage band with some local friends of mine in Burbank called Tom Driscoll and the Tomcats. And Tom Driscoll was just a born promoter. He talked us into rehearsing, talked us onto the NBC soundstage where the Tonight Show's done now. He just walked onto the place and told everybody he was a good friend of John West, who owned NBC. They, oh God, no problem, anything you want. So we rehearsed there for, my concept of time is a little funny, but I mean, it seemed like a couple of months, it might've been a couple of weeks. But until this guy walked up to Tom and said, who are you people? And Tom said, well, I'm a friend of John West. He says, well, I'm John West. Get out of here. So that was the end of that. But he talked us into free time at a recording studio in Hollywood. And I can't remember what it was named, but it was the same building and installation as Sun West. It was, at the time, it might've been probably just mono and 2-track. But anyway, so I went in there to record Farewell Aldebaran, and I called Zolly to see if he wanted to be partners in the production. So we formed Hair Shirt Productions, it was called, and started working on Farewell Aldebaran. And the manager of the studio really liked what we were doing, and he said, listen, Pat wants to make an album, and would you guys be interested in producing it?
Yeah.
We talked to him, I said, sure. He said, well, the thing is, we need to start it pretty much right away. And I said, well, we'll put Aldebaran on hold for the time that we do Pat. So we did his album called Departure. And it turned out really well. We got to pick the tunes and the people. And God, we were using a lot of Elvis's band, Jerry Sheff on bass, and another senior moment. Larry Knechtel on piano was, and Clarence White on guitar, and his Elvis's #1 guitar player, Jim. God, I can't believe I can't remember his name. He was Rick Nelson's guitar player in the really old days. They brought him out from,
I think it was Charlie Hodge, but I don't think it's him.
I think it was from Louisiana. Anyway, God, why can't I think of his name? Burton, James Burton, for Pete's sake. Anyway, great band. Toxie French playing drums, and did a couple of John Stewart songs. We did John D. Loudermilk songs, Biff Rose, and Pat sang his ass off. He really came through. When we first started, Zolly was staying at our house out in Woodland Hills, and on New Year's Eve, Zolly and Judy and I didn't go anywhere, just at the house, and I'd given Judy a set of hot rollers, Clairol hot rollers.
Mhm.
So we were bored. She put Zolly's hair up in hot rollers. He's sitting there with his hair in rollers. He said, I'm going to call Boone. And he called him up. And he said, hey, Pat, can you sing your hits over the phone? We want to kind of get into the mood. And he starts singing all of his hits, and Zolly's holding the phone. I go, on a day like today, we pass the time away. And just had the best time. And Pat really liked Zolly a lot. And we got along really great with him. And there was just some wonderful things that happened. We had a big band in the studio, a lot of players and brass and horns and rhythm section. And the guy that did all the checking of sessions for the musicians union came in. And Zolly saw him coming in and took $100 bill out of his pocket, stuck it in the guy's jacket, and said, hey, go have lunch. And the guy went, and Zolly grabbed it back on, rah. Just kidding, because it was a union session. But a lot of great things. And then we finished that album, and then finished Farewell Aldebaran, then did the Fifth Avenue Band and Tim Buckley's third album, Happy Sad, over at Elektra. We went there.
Yeah.
And then Zolly and I kind of ended our partnership. He went off and was part of, the thing that the founding members of Saturday Night Live were doing on Broadway or off Broadway with Chevy Chase and those guys.
Oh, the Lemmings?
Yeah.
Of the Lampoon.
Yeah. A lot of Canadian people, and Zolly was Canadian.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, and then I started producing other people and got a call from the Turtles.
Mhm.
And let me see, was that? Yeah, that was before Judy and I broke up.
Yeah. I can tell you the chronology. I mean, it's like, so the Turtles, they had Chip doing Battle of the Bands.
It was like
And then-
1970. I think.
And that was in 68. And then in 69, they did Turtle Soup with Ray Davis from the Kinks.
Right.
And then
Right.
they started work on what you were working on, which was going to be an album called Shell Shock. But this is where the story gets kind of muddy, because they never really talk about you much. Like if you see that Turtles documentary that they made a zillion years ago, you're not mentioned at all. And they just act like, oh, after Shell Shock, we recorded Lady O, which they produced themselves, and then we broke up. And it's like, wait a minute, you were still doing stuff into 1970 and quite late into the year, and with Jerry, and it's like, what's going on here? So that's kind of the whole purpose of me contacting you, because it's like, I want to know that part of the story.
Well, I produced like 9 things for him.
Yeah. And I have all the tracks that I think you did written down, so I'll ask you about them.
What ended it was the label going out of business.
Yeah.
And then they bought their masters of all their stuff.
Mhm.
Howard and Mark did, and they never paid me.
Oh.
Which has a lot to do with them not talking about me.
Oh.
And they never paid Chip either for his production.
Yeah.
In fact, they told Chip, get a lawyer, go after it.
Mhm.
He was on the phone with Howard and Mark, and they said, go for it.
Yeah.
We got Mutt Cohen here in his whole office. Go for it. and which would have meant spending a lot of money on a really good lawyer. And Chip just said, screw it. And I never went after him either. It's just, that surprised me, because I don't think they paid the band either.
Yeah. Well, they're going through a lot of turmoil. I mean, that part I do know. I mean, it's like they're going
Well,
through different managers, they're being sued and blah, 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 blah. But
yeah,
they should have still paid you.
I don't think Howard and Mark were going through a lot of turmoil.
Yeah.
They had Mutt Cohen's office behind handling any legal problems.
Yeah.
I just don't think so.
Okay. They act like they did.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe they did.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I was just surprised.
Okay.
That they would do that.
So why did they? I mean, obviously you're friends. I suppose before this. I mean, why did they call you? I mean, was it just because you're available, or you done good
I don't know,
production on the
maybe
Pat Boone album, or what? What was there?
maybe because John Sider was in the group. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
And
Did
then
he
John
vote for you to produce the group? Was he like,
could be.
Okay.
I really don't know.
okay,
But a year after that, John joined Judy and I for Rosebud,
okay.
and was in that group until Judy and I broke up on stage one night. And then John and I became very close, and I started producing, and he and David Vaught and Peter Climbs and I became a team, like a production team.
Yeah.
Bass, drums, guitar, and production. And I play keyboard a lot also. And John and I have been close ever since, even though we've been geographically separated.
Right.
But
Is he still in New York, or where is he?
yeah, out,
Okay.
I believe it's out on Long Island. But
Okay.
the last time I saw him was in Pittsburgh. The Spoonful did one of those PBS money gathering
Oh, yeah.
things they do, and now we'll break from the program and blah, blah, blah to raise money.
Right.
And so we did a segment of that along with Spanky and our gang.
Yeah.
Let me see, Eric Weisberg was there doing, like his stuff that he did like for, the Deliverance. Like he and Marshall Brickman were like the banjo and guitar on all of that stuff. It wasn't that kid, it wasn't him.
Right. I figured, but they did the dueling banjos recording.
I saw Eric.
Yeah.
I knew Eric from the early days in the Village, in 63 and 4 in the Village.
Yeah.
And but he hung out with bikers. And if you saw him just on the street, it was, hey, how are you doing? But if he was standing with the bikers, he'd walk up and he'd wave at you. Don't say nothing. I don't know you. But I saw him in Pittsburgh at this gig, and he walked by and he had these Scruggs tuners, that you make the second string go up and down, the second, third string.
Yeah.
That's where they get that sound, that down, 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 it's turning these tuners. And they were made by this guy named Walt Pittman in California, who did them for Scruggs and all the other big banjo players. And he walked by and said, "Hey, are those Pittman pegs?" And he whipped around. He said, "Really? You know about it?" We talked for like a half hour about that. And Tommy Makem was on the show, and I talked to him for like 2 hours over lunch, and it was great. It was just all these people. Trini Lopez. I talked to him like 3 hours when I asked him, "So how'd you get started?" Something like that. He gave me his whole life history. And it was interesting. And it went from the bar up to a room where the guy who was putting the PBS thing on, and then back down again, and then back in, I moved to Palm Springs, but he's really an interesting fellow. We just had a good time talking.
So, I guess back on the recording sessions, though. I do have on my note. You mentioned that you worked on "Me About You" that ended up on the Happy Together album. I did write that down, so I did give you credit. So, do you have memories of specific tracks, or if I said track titles, would that spark a memory of what you produced on that album or anything like that? Because some of them came out and some of them didn't, and they eventually all did.
I saw an album called Shell Shock that had those things on it.
Yeah. So, but a lot of them weren't released at the time. I mean, like in '69, a few of them were released in '74 when Flo and Eddie got the rights to everything, and they put a few. And then a few were released later, and then some were even released after that Shell Shock album, which is kind of surprising that they still find things. But so I mean, I guess I'll go through track by track. If you say I don't have any memory, that's fine, whatever. Right. But one was called "Can I Go On?" Does that spring a memory?
Not exactly, no.
Okay. Then the other one, this one seems like it was designed to be a hit because Flo and Ed re-recorded it on their solo album. It was Goodbye Surprise. It was a Bonner Gordon one.
Yeah, that was a absolutely dynamite record, the way we did it. It was this guy named Barry, I can't think of his last name, was the engineer at Sun West. And he put the basses left and right. He like put them out of phase on the left and right, which sounded great in stereo. When you put it in the mono, the bass disappeared. You know, there's ways of doing that now these days, but it just, something happened, and it also came right about the time that White Whale went belly up. So there was no promotion because there was no label. Yeah, but it was a really good record. Howard sang really great.
Next one I have is If We Only Had the Time. Is that?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. Okay. Another one called Like It or Not.
Yeah, that's another Bonner and Gordon, I think.
Oh, okay. Now, when you were producing these, did you have any input, or did you just say, "All right, we're next one we're doing"?
When I produce, I don't like to get in the way of the band. I like bringing out the band. You know, I don't. Not like Phil Spector. God knows the band has nothing to do with it.
Right.
But if I had an idea, I'd run it past them.
Okay.
I certainly wouldn't insist on it, but I would, run it past them. And it was a good relationship. We had a good time doing it.
Were they pretty much still considered together at that time, or were they kind of already drifting apart?
No, they were very together.
Okay. Because I've heard differing accounts that they were pretty tight as a group until they broke up, and then after that, well, yeah. Okay,
yeah. Well, and it was after that they broke up. So yeah, they were very tight and really enthusiastic. Like Gas Money was one of the ones that they just had a great time with.
Now, did you produce that? It didn't say that you produced that. And Teardrops, the other one. So how did
I'd have to hear it to make sure.
Well, they're both like doo-wop sounding songs. I mean, if you're saying Gas Money, that it's similar to that. It's Mark singing Teardrops, and I think it was Jim Pons doing Gas Money, if I remember correctly.
I don't think it was Pons.
Oh, maybe it was one of the other, but it was one of the other ones. I don't think it was Howard.
Howard and Mark did all the leads.
Okay. So maybe it was Howard on that one. Okay.
Or Mark, it could have been.
But how did that come out? You mentioned that one. How did that come about to do one kind of like a doo-wop style versus just the standard late 60s rock and roll?
They came in with it and said, we want to do the song that we knew way back when,
Okay.
And played it. I said, great, let's do it. And I think we did it in one afternoon. It was done. It was very loose, but that was the way those things were in the old days. And so it came out really good. That, and Who Would Ever Think That I Would Marry Margaret was another one that.
So you do remember that one.
And I believe that was the B-side of Goodbye Surprise. I'm not really.
No, it was the B-side. Yeah, it was the A or B-side. I forgot. We ain't gonna party no more. We ain't gonna party no more. Was
right. Yeah.
Because actually, Goodbye Surprise never got released back in the day. It was only when Flo and Eddie got together that they put it
like
out.
I say, it happened right when White Whale went belly up.
Yeah. Now, Flo and Eddie, or Howard and Mark, if you prefer, always insist that they never wanted to record Who Would Ever Think That I Would Want to Marry Margaret. Were they really that adamant about it, saying, I don't want to do it? Okay.
No, they wanted to do it.
Okay. So maybe they're making up stories to kind of, grease it up or something.
Unless they were putting on a big face for me, but they brought it in. They wanted to do it, and we did it.
Okay, because they acted like, this is the part of the story that I've heard, is they acted like White Whale insisted that they had to record this, and they didn't want to. They hated it, but then they said, "Okay, fine, we'll do it, just so we can keep recording."
Well, maybe I never heard that. I never heard that part of the story, and it didn't seem to me that they were against it.
And you can't hear it on the recording. It sounds like they're having fun, like anything else.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Another one that never came out, but was kind of unfinished, they did again as Flo and Eddie, is Marmondy Mill. It was kind of like this epic thing.
That I don't.
Okay, so you don't remember that one very well. Okay. Another one, I don't think they re-recorded this one. There You Sit Lonely. Does that sound familiar? Okay.
That we did.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't do anything when they were Flo and Eddie. I mean that.
Well, no, I
that was
don't mean original. Maybe they just demoed it, and that maybe you didn't do a final recording, because some of these have come out in recent times just as they're listed as demo, not as a final recording. So
somewhere I have tapes of like rough mixes of the stuff we did.
okay.
I'll have to see. I have to go through those someday.
Okay. A couple more. You Want to Be a Woman? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay. I know I'm straining your brain from 52 years ago on this stuff.
It was a while ago.
And then the last one, this one also was re-recorded by Flo and Eddie, and I think this is only a demo, and you may not have even helped on it. Strange Girl. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure
Yeah.
about that one.
Okay. And then this is a really obscure thing. Apparently before White Whale closed, they copyrighted a bunch of song titles. Now, this doesn't mean that they actually were real titles, but I'll just rattle them off if anything sounds familiar. But none of these have ever been officially released, at least with these names. One was called John's Medley. One was called I've Been Gone Too Long. One called Kathleen's Brain. Let's Pack and Beat It. On the Inside.
No,
and Saturday
sounds like
Movie. Okay, which one?
That almost sounds familiar. Let's Pack and Beat It.
Okay. And now, if you don't remember those, I don't blame you, because I mean, they could have been working titles for other things. I don't know. It's just something White Whale copyrighted before they closed their doors for good. And so anyway, I just mentioned all these things because I said you were kind of there at the end. What, maybe you knew something about it. And if you don't, that's fine. I was just kind of straining your brain here on some of these things.
Yeah. The only time I saw them after that, after they made the album and after they stopped being the Turtles, was I believe it was after they stopped being the Turtles, was Howard and his wife split up, and Judy and I had split up, and I started dating his ex-wife. She was really a sweetheart. I really liked her a lot, and I wasn't really crazy about the way Howard treated her, but I liked her a lot, and she ended up doing well, I think, as far as having a nice life.
I think Howard has gotten married 4 times, maybe 5 in his life. So. I have his autobiography. I can't remember. I can't keep track of it. But so obviously you're at the very end. Were you there, like when? I mean, so for lack of a better term, when they broke up? I mean, like,
No.
let's stop now, or how did it stop for you? Did they just stop coming to sessions, or what?
No. The record company ceased to be, so there were no more sessions.
Oh, so did they call you and say, "Hi, there's no more sessions, stop coming," or what? How did that
pretty
work?
much.
Okay.
Pretty much. Yeah. Said White Whale doesn't exist anymore, so we're going to see what we can do, and blah blah blah. But that was it for me and them as far as recording went.
Wow. Now they did actually release like a compilation later in the year that had earlier songs, like it called Wooden Head, but that was like late 1970, and that was after your involvement. So I guess the label existed just as like a label, but not recording new acts or new recordings or anything. Is that what it?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, yeah. So now another thing is Mark and Howard act like it was eons before they got the call to go into Zappa's band. But when I'm looking things up, it's almost like it was like less than 2 weeks, but maybe 2 weeks seems like a long time back in the day when you don't know what's coming next. Yeah.
Well, it's like I was saying about certainly my time with Tom Driscoll and the Tomcats and those things that seemed like a year were actually like a month. Because time was stretched out so much more at that age.
Right. And you also didn't know what was going to happen next. In hindsight, you can say it was only 2 weeks, big deal.
There's a lot of things from back in those days that I think lasted longer than they did, just because I was so much younger than then.
Yes.
It's just a natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, I was just kind of curious about that time, but during the time you were recording them, everything went pretty smoothly. They didn't have any
Yeah.
bickering or fighting or anything like
No,
that.
no,
Okay.
it was always, it was a lot of fun. The whole thing was a lot of fun.
That's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they always act like, oh, it was falling apart, but I guess everybody's emotion were different. I mean, if you were like kind of not actively involved with the group, you're just producing them. It was probably just fun every time that they showed up. Right?
Yeah. And there were some social getting together, like we went to dinner at Howard's house one night, just a very social thing. And it was, there weren't any rough edges in that whole time that I recall. And there may have been, because Howard and Mark had been close since they were really young,
Right.
before the Turtles. And so they were like an entity inside the entity, So they may have had some planning for the future that didn't include the band, very likely, but I wasn't aware of any of that.
Now, did you ever work with any of them again, either on stage or any other?
John Sider.
Okay, Cider, but with Mark or Howard or anything?
No,
Later on?
no.
Okay, not even those reunion tours or Happy Together tours or anything?
No, my brother, though, has done a ton of
That's
them.
true,
In
true. Yeah,
fact,
the association's usually part of those, and Gary Puckett and stuff like that.
They got one coming up, and I was not aware that Howard has been gone from it for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, apparently he has heart and back problems. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
And so Mark goes out with Ron Dante now, the Archies. So
I can dig it. I mean, I've been thinking of myself of touring again with either the Spoonful or somebody, or by myself. But I had COVID a year ago, this last June, and I'm still getting over it. And and it gave me considerable emphysema as a result. And so my stamina is way down as far as, I can't imagine walking fast through an airport to catch a plane. It would,
right.
I'd be one of those guys in the wheelchair, going to the plane. And I don't want to go out until this Delta variant is come under control, because if I get that again, and it attacks my lungs again, that could be it,
Right.
So
as for me, I am going out and about. I did get vaccinated and everything, and I actually saw. I'll even show you. I got Marshall Tucker Band. It's probably backwards on here. Yeah,
right on.
So there's only one member. He's been the only member for quite a while now, but he's 73 now, and he's still going out. They just started going out again, and that was my first. That was last night, actually. No, a couple nights ago. It wasn't last night. We were going to talk last night, right? It was Wednesday night, and he seems to be doing well. And but everybody I've been talking to in music, I've talked to Bobby Rydell, I talked to Gary Puckett on these shows. They're hesitant to really excited about getting back out on the road, and a lot of them are starting about this time. But I mean, if you don't have the stamina for it, I totally get that too. It's like,
well, if I hadn't gotten the COVID, I'd be fine. I'd still be leery about it,
right?
But I mean, it really kicked my ass.
I'm glad you're still here.
It was COVID pneumonia, and it was a bitch. And so we're basically still in partial isolation. My wife and I, we just go out. We'll go to the restaurant where our daughter works, or we'll go to the store. That's kind of it, And we're masking when we go to Walmart, for God's sake. Nobody. 28% of the people in Arkansas have been vaccinated.
Wow.
That's just so. It's the Bible Belt. They say God will take care of us. Yeah. Rest in peace is all I gotta say. It's crazy.
So let's assume the best. Okay, let's say you get your old stamina back. Do you foresee yourself maybe going on the tour a couple of years from now, doing something either solo or with the band or something else?
Well, it might be solo, because I'm working on 2 albums now that are, each one is 80% finished.
Oh,
and I really like them a lot. And I'm going to see if I can get them to a label that'll do something with them.
Mhm.
There's a label I heard about in California that specializes in people my age from the, that have a history.
Mhm.
And there's also a label like that in Germany, one in Holland.
Mhm.
So I'm going to try, and also Omnivore, I'll try them too. I really like them. And I did a
Yeah.
solo album for them that was released in October 17. And but if I can't, then I think I'll be my own record company. And I want to have a commercial website anyway, selling artwork and books and all different kinds of my music. So one way or the other. But as far as, I don't know about performing, I have to see if I can get the stamina back. And if it's under control where I'm not worried about getting the Delta variant,
Right.
or any other kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
Because it's not worth it to go out and come back and die,
Right. How about producing? Do you produce other people's records anymore, or is that kind of like in the past also?
Well, it's been a while.
Yeah.
People are so much into doing their own thing now, it's so much easier to record yourself.
Right.
But and I've been so concerned with like I was 10 years performing in Eureka Springs,
Mhm.
3 nights a week, and at one time I was working 4 nights a week, a hotel here and then 2 places in Eureka.
Mhm.
And but the COVID kind of changed everything.
Mhm.
Just nobody was working, or they're working online,
Right.
a lot of that stuff going on. So they're starting up again in Eureka, but like I say, in the red states, it's a gamble. Yeah. I mean, you go to Walmart and then you hear people say, it's just like the flu. Well, the flu didn't kill nearly 600,000 people. Okay. The highest it ever was like 48,000 casualties with the flu.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty scary. I mean, I was masking up completely. I was working from home for the longest time. Then I did start working out in an office again, but had to wear a mask and was got my temperature taken every day electronically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then after everybody started getting vaccinated about a month ago, they started saying, okay, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. So
right.
but I work in the health industry, so I mean they're very careful about it. They're giving the tests and everything like that. So
and there's some people who are saying it might have been a little too soon,
Yeah.
Like if
and I'm being cautious.
Really...
I mean, even when I was at Marshall Tucker's band, I wasn't in the audience. I was outside the gate. I mean, you could still see the band, but and distancing still, because it's like, who knows? I don't know these people. It's like,
it's a toss-up. It's really a toss-up.
Even if you're vaccinated, you can still get it. Chances are slimmer, but still, So I'm trying to be careful.
Yeah, and in the meantime, I'm just. I enjoy working in the studio, and that's what I'm doing.
That's cool. Well, I mean, I guess that's pretty much all the questions I had one last thing.
Sure.
So about 2006, Howard Kaylan did do a solo album with Billy Bob Thornton called Dust Bunnies, and they did cover a song that I believe you wrote called Snowblind, co-wrote.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So were you aware of that? So I mean,
no,
you do have a connection to him belatedly. I didn't know if you knew about that or had anything to do with it, or at least talk about that song a little bit for a second.
It's a song that Judy and I and Zali wrote.
Yeah.
And no, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, he does a decent job with it. He really belts it out. Howard could sing all the way till he stopped, till he stopped touring. But it's like So
Howard's a fine singer. He really is.
All right. What was that song originally for? Was that for
Farewell Aldebaran? It was the opening song of Farewell Aldebaran.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure. It's like it came together one night in the studio, and Larry Beckett was staying with us for a while. So it was Beckett and Judy and I, and Zali, because Zali was also, it was the 4 of us in one house. And Judy had just finished the lyric,
And I guess we were waiting for Gary Brandt to set something, but we just started messing and just started taking hold. It just started working, and within an hour it was done. Zolly playing bass, Beckett playing drums, because he was the drummer in the Tim Buckley band when they were in high school, and with Jim Fielder playing bass, and we got the first take, and it was like 2 takes, and Gary recorded it live with the vocal and everything going, except for a guitar solo, and then Zolly put on a lead guitar, and that was it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, the way Howard performs, he performs this really thumping beat. I don't know if the original one is that strong, but
boom,
boom, and then he goes
boom,
snowblind, kind of like really grinds it out like that. That's the way he sang it.
Well, yeah, Judy sang her ass off. She was really, really quite good.
Yeah. So the genesis of that album that I found out by interviewing Andy Kahn, the keyboard player for the Turtles, a long time. Is he said, Andy said, let's record something. Why don't you do songs you've always wanted to do? And apparently that was one he chose. He did like 10 tracks, and that was one of them. So, so I guess we really liked it.
And Omnivore re-released that album in 2016.
Yeah.
And we went out to California and and performed at the Grammy Museum and then at McCabe's. And just had a great time. Was it you that I already told that story to? Or
no, no, this is new here.
No, I was talking to my friend Dave Bias today. And I told him, and all 5 of my kids sang background.
Wow.
On that, and it was wonderful. We had a great time.
Very cool. Well, that's all the questions I have. Usually at this point I say, well, you said you weren't touring right now, but if you have anything you'd like to promote, or a website, or how people can get in contact with you, anything else?
Well, the website isn't happening yet, but it'll be jerryester.com.
Okay, very cool.
And I'm looking forward to getting that together. So I have a lot of stuff, a lot of my own artwork, and I have a children's book that I want to peddle, and my new fetish, which is making refrigerator magnets.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
I got into a fetish of drawing fish, my own kind of fish, and I think that'll be fun. But that's just for fun. But a lot of stuff. Anyway.
Well, very good. It was a pleasure speaking with you for the last hour or so, and thank you for being a guest on the show today on the Fun Ideas podcast.
My pleasure, Mark.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
Okay.
We'll talk soon.
Take care.
You too.
Adios.